Hey everyone, welcome back to Next Chapter Audio, where we're done to just talk about books we devour in one sitting, but also the ones we read slowly. The ones that make us pause, reread a paragraph, and sit back like, okay, that was a sentence. And today's pick is exactly that kind of book. We're talking about Vigil by George Saunders, a brand new 2026 release that's already being called a moral masterpiece. And if you've spent time in the serious literary corners of BookTube lately, you've probably seen people deep diving into it like it is a text reabo to defend a thesis. Because when Saunders drops a new book, it's not just a release, it's a literary event. George Saunders has that rare reputation where his name alone signals something. You're not going to get a simple story. You're going to get something sharp, weird, funny, in a painful way, and morally loaded in a way that sticks to you after you close the cover. And Vigil seems to be doing exactly that. This novel deals with the legacy of a corporate CEO, but not in a clean, straightforward, biographical way. Saunders approaches it the way he approaches most things. Sideways, with satire, with dark comedy, with those unsettling moments where you're laughing and then realizing, a second later, that you shouldn't be ballooning because the truth underneath the joke is too real. That's the Saunders specialty. He makes you laugh first, and then he makes you feel guilty for laughing. And then he makes you sit with the guilt long enough to understand what it is really about. So if you re someone who loves books that feel like they redoing something deeper than just telling a story, if you like, prose that bites, themes that wrestle with morality, and characters that feel like they were built to expose something about society, Vigil is definitely the kind of novel that explains why the literary world keeps treating Saunders like a heavyweight. And it also explains why literary booktubers are so obsessed right now. Because this is the kind of book that gives you material. Not just what happened, but what does it mean? Not just plot points, but themes, symbols, structure, voice, satire, ethics, power, class, responsibility. All of it. This is a book people can make hour-long video essays about without running out of things to say. Now, the premise sounds deceptively simple at first. A corporate CEO's legacy becomes the center of the narrative, and the book examines it in a darkly comic way. But in Saunders' hands, that kind of idea becomes more than just commentary on corporate power. It becomes a question. A moral question. What does it mean to live a successful life if the success is built on systems that harm people? What does it mean to leave behind a legacy when you don't control how the world interprets you? And what happens when the story society tells about you is polished, branded, and convenient, while the real consequences of your life are messy and human and difficult to package? Saunders is very interested in what people pretend not to see. And corporate legacy is one of the biggest pretend not to see areas in modern life, because CEOs are often treated like mythic figures, visionaries, saviors, geniuses, disruptors. But the actual human reality underneath is almost always more complicated. There are employees, families, communities, policies, consequences, choices made in boardrooms that become real suffering in ordinary lives. Vigil leans into that tension, the shiny story versus the truth underneath. And what makes it even more biting is the humor. Because Saunders doesn't come at this with dry seriousness, he comes at it with comedy that feels like a knife. A lot of satire is loud and obvious. It hits you over the head and says, this is the point. Saunders doesn't always do that. His satire is often quiet in its cruelty. It sneaks up on you. He'll give you a ridiculous situation that feels exaggerated, and you'll laugh. And then you realize it's not exaggerated at all. It's just real life, turned slightly to the side so you can finally see how absurd it has always been. That's where Vigil feels powerful. It doesn't ask permission to be uncomfortable. It just is. And the reason people are calling it a moral masterpiece is because Saunders' dose and tea lets you stay in the safe place of those bad corporations out there. He forces you into the unpleasant recognition that morality is often a system we benefit from without questioning until it's too late. He's not only asking, was this CEO a good person? In some simplistic way, he's asking bigger questions. What is a good person inside a bad system? What counts as harm if the harm is outsourced, hidden, normalized, or delayed? What counts as responsibility when the damage is spread across thousands of people? And can anyone truly claim innocence when they've profited from structures that quietly break others? This is the kind of thinking that makes Vigil so perfect for deep dives, because it doesn't just entertain. It interrogates, and Saunders also has that ability to write characters in a way that's both absurd and heartbreakingly human. He often gives you people who feel ridiculous on the surface, people saying the wrong thing, believing the wrong thing, clinging to comfort. But then he lets you see the fear underneath, the insecurity, the desire to be loved, the need to feel like they mattered. He reminds you that even the people doing harm are still human, which is uncomfortable to admit, but necessary if you want to understand how harm happens in the first place. Now, let's talk about the prose, because Saunders being Saunders means the writing itself is part of the experience. This isn't the kind of novel not because it's inaccessible, but because the language makes you slow down. There's a precision to it, a rhythm, a sharpness. He writes sentences that feel funny and tragic at the same time. He'll describe something in a way that feels like a joke, and then you realize the joke is grief, or the joke is fear, or the joke is the lie we tell ourselves to keep going. And because the story is dealing with corporate legacy, the prose often becomes part of the critique. You can feel the way language gets used to soften reality. The way corporate speak can make harm sound clean. The way PR can take something ugly and dress it in shining words. Saunders knows that language is power. He knows that words shape what people accept as normal. And Vigil, from what makes it so discussable, seems deeply interested in that. Not just what happened, but how we talk about what happened. Who gets to name things? Who gets to decide what the story is? This book is also trending because it's a kind of literary experience that feels increasingly rare in mass online discourse. A book that isn't built to be easy, not in a snobby way, in a meaningful way. A book that asks you to think. A book that asks you to sit with discomfort. A book that refuses to hand you simple answers. It's the kind of novel that makes you feel like you're participating in something. Like reading it isn't passive, like the book is doing something to you while you read. And literary booktubers love that, because it gives them something to chew on, something to analyze beyond, I liked it or I didn't like it. They can talk about structure, moral ambiguity, satire, capitalism, legacy, complicity, reputation, the way humor disarms readers, the way tragedy hides inside comedy. And those deep dives become contagious. Because even people who don't usually pick up literary fiction start feeling curious when everyone is saying, "This book ruined my brain in the best way." Now, here's the honest part. Vigil won't be for everyone. If you're looking for a clean, plot-heavy story with a straightforward beginning, middle, and end, this may not be the experience you want. If you like thrillers that keep your adrenaline high, Vigil will feel slower in a different way. The tension here isn't who did it. The tension is moral. It's emotional. It's about ideas. And if you prefer books that comfort you, this one probably won't. Saunders doesn't write comfort. He writes confrontation, soft only by humor. But if you like books that challenge you, that make you reflect, that make you uncomfortable in a way that feels purposeful, this is a book you'll remember. And if you're already a Saunders fan, this is probably exactly what you came for. Dark comedy with moral weight, brilliant prose, and that signature feeling that you're reading something weirdly human even when it's satirical. So here's my final verdict. Vigil is trending because it's the kind of novel that invites serious conversation. It's being called a moral masterpiece because it doesn't just tell a story about a corporate CEO's legacy. It holds up a mirror to the systems that create legacies, and the people who benefit from them, and the stories we choose to believe to avoid looking too closely. It's smart, darkly funny, uncomfortable, and deeply human in a way that sticks. If you love literary fiction that has teeth, if you love satire that cuts, if you love prose that feels alive on the page, Vigil is absolutely worth reading. And it's the kind of book that doesn't just end when you finish it. It stays in your head. And that's why people can't stop talking about it. And that's it for today's episode on Next Chapter Audio. If you enjoyed this review, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, are you a literary deep dive reader? Or do you usually prefer lighter reads? And if you've read George Saunders before, what's your favorite work of his? Until next time, happy reading, and I'll see you in the next chapter.